Perfect. All right. All right. So before I jump in, I have a presentation here, mainly just talking points that help me guide the conversation as we go here. So I'll click through this, but nothing too heavy on any of the slides. I'm on an iPad right here that I'm sharing on, and then I have my presentation on another computer. So I'm in here twice, and I have my notes to the side. So if you see me looking at my presentation notes. We touched on Laura Lee touched on some of the stuff here, but in order to get things flowing, I thought I would start with a little bit about myself. Oh, super bright. As you said, a recovering software engineer. So in my first career in my 20s, I started a software development company with my friend from high school at age 22. And then over the course of my 20s, basically grew that business. And I ended up falling out of love with engineering. And I used to say I came over to the dark side. I don't know if all the Creative Morning team would want to call it the dark side here, but kind of moved over slowly over time, and then finally eventually embraced the power of design and creativity. I'm going to touch on that a little bit more in detail further along in the presentation. I moved downtown when I was 22, some 13 years ago or so. Downtown Phoenix has been a big part of sort of my personal identity and building and finding a community. Obviously, the art community is down here, Roosevelt Row, First Friday, and I really like the urban nature of what Phoenix did have to offer for an urban community, be able to walk places and pretty much bike or walk everywhere. So I've been down here. My agency's office has been down here. I've been living down here for quite a while, pre-light rail, if any of you are familiar, actually. So I moved down here right before the light rail. And then I've been really invested in the community, and I find it fascinating to be part of a project as a area builds up so fast and so many new people move in. What does it mean to create culture in a city, and especially in a downtown urban area where we didn't really have it? So to be able to participate in real time as so many different things go up here from ASU to all the new development. There's cranes going up and down all the time. Really enjoy the community. It feels like a really big, small town, or a really small, big city, depending on which way you want to look at it. And if you guys don't come down here very often, definitely encourage you to come check it out. A lot has changing and continues to change with places opening up down here and all the people moving in. So I'm a writer at heart. Sort of my creative medium, if you had to pick one that I'm most familiar and comfortable with, it is definitely writing. And I'm personally fascinated with the power of language and words in general. Some of my engineering background has left me with sort of I take like a technical approach. I like to technically write. And I think one of the most amazing things in the world is finding the exact right perfect word in the exact right perfect moment, and be able to find that and communicate it. I just think it's a truly fascinating thing. So a little bit more. So just some factoids about me. I'm actually a high school and college dropout, though I don't recommend that path to anybody. This actually ties in with this early esports participant. So I actually dropped out of high school to play video games in my senior year. Specifically, if any of you are familiar, probably not. At the time, it was StarCraft. I actually played StarCraft for the World Cyber Games and won the Arizona Regional, and United States, placed high enough to basically qualify for a trip to Korea, and like a little bit of a world tour in the summer of 2000, in the summer between my junior and senior year of high school. And my parents allowed me to basically go on that journey and go travel around and kind of skip school. And I tried my best to kind of keep up on it, but by the time I got back, it was actually a sad story. I got bullied out of high school. When I came back, it was not very cool to be like a super. I grew up in Lake Havasu, actually, if you guys are familiar. So came back from that, and several months later, like December or so, after several months out on the road playing video games, and basically I came back and I was so behind, and I also got bullied. It was an unfortunate experience. People were just like call me a huge nerd, whatever. Anyways, I tested well, ended up getting into college, no problem. But then I ended up getting a job offer. I was learning programming, and if any of you are familiar at all, whatever you're learning at that point doesn't really apply. You kind of teach yourself everything, and if you're able to teach yourself, it doesn't really matter too much. So I ended up getting a job I knew was going to teach me, a job offer I knew was going to teach me much more in practical terms than ever in school. So that ended up causing me to be a high school and college dropout. But obviously it hasn't stopped me from pursuing my dreams and goals professionally. And then lastly, I was like early in the Bitcoin, in the first run way back when, I think it was 2011, I want to say, or so. And I made a recommendation to a friend that like, this is going to be the next big thing. And he spent, I don't know, like $5,000 on something on Bitcoin when they were at like $60 to $70. And he ended up getting really invested in the community and was able to retire a few times over from his initial investments. And he treats me very kindly. He always sends me a card every year from, kind of being like, thank you, you're the, that I turned him onto it. And I find that a fun little factoid. I'm definitely a crypto Bitcoin advocate as well. But yeah, I wish I was in his position for sure. I'm definitely not jealous at all. All right. So, all right, lastly, one last thing. So I'm going to be reading off these slides. One thing I did not put on there, I don't do these talks very often. So when it comes to, or ever. So when it comes to daring or taking a dare of some sort, me doing this alone I think would qualify. Before I move on and jump into the meat of the presentation here, I just want to mention that I'm actually dyslexic. I can't spell my way out of a paper bag. And as I read, I'm probably going to fumble over a few of my own slides as I read them. So just give me a little bit of a break there as I do that. Whenever the teacher would be like, hey, Dustin, read this page aloud in school, that was literally the most terrifying thing you could ever ask of me in my life. Even though I grew up to love writing, I love language, love reading, which is ended up, I find kind of fascinating that it worked out that way. So, all right, and moving on. So dare define. So kind of touching on the writer in me and my fascination with language. The first thing I thought to do here was actually to just define the word and understand exactly what we're dealing with here with dare. So Laura Lee touched on this in her own way. This would be the more technical definition here. To have the courage to do something, to defy or challenge someone to do something, and then the noun a challenge, especially to prove courage. So what's interesting here to me, so I look at this and say, well, what's the important part of this definition? What's the really core characteristic of dare to dare or daring? And it requires courage. It requires that you have courage, bravery to face up to something. Specifically, well, let's move on. What is courage? I have a slide for that. So let's get courage, the ability to do something that frightens one. So strength in the face of pain or grief. So I think this gets a little bit closer to something everybody can identify with. That is fear. So to dare to face a fear, which is no small thing. In fact, it's everything. So as I was thinking about it, I came to understand and think that fear is fundamental to the human experience, and is probably the number one motivator of behavior in people, one way or the other, either to attack or to address or avoid various things in their life. When the people who are avoiding their fears, not taking a dare, but those who decide to sort of face a fear, those are the people that are daring. And it's everything, really. No progress is made without sort of taking a risk and facing a fear, and it's a big part of our journey as creatives. I'm sure each of us in our own individual way. To the point where I don't even have to ask. I can almost, when I don't have to, I can guarantee that all of us have a familiar relationship with fear in our own way or another. One of us might have no fear going outside the box with the design or something, but something else in their life is gonna cause them fear. We all have that in us, that is part of the human condition. So and fear drives the news. It drives so much of what we do or don't do in our lives. So it's actually a really super powerful force. Fear is also the enemy, especially fear of failure. So as I was putting this talk together, I thought I'd be remiss not to emphasize that fear is really the enemy, and as creatives, we probably all have a familiar relationship with the fear of failure. It sort of comes with the territory in a lot of ways, depending on your creative medium. But I was thinking and wondering how many masterpieces or great pieces of work have never left someone's head, and because of the fear of failure, fear in general. And I'd probably argue that it's such a prevalent thing in our lives that there's probably more great work that has never even been realized or attempted than has. And that if we can encourage each other and ourselves to take the risk, to dare to try something different, to face that fear. Yes, Aaron, imposter syndrome, definitely fear. I definitely identify with the imposter syndrome part of fear myself greatly. Actually, that's one of the ones I work with and probably struggle with most, especially coming from a software development background. And one day it was just like, I'm gonna go this other route with no real official schooling or anything like that. And so I didn't really have a basis from which to create my confidence, and you have to go around and kind of find your own way. But I'm a big believer that each one of us and everybody is on their own personal journey. We all start in different places, have different values and different goals, depending on our upbringing and whatnot. And addressing and overcoming imposter syndrome for me is part of my journey, and how I'm gonna, how one of you might address imposter syndrome it could be different than someone else. But at the same time, there's those sayings, fake it till you make it, whatnot. I think there's a lot of credence to that. But at the end of the day, I find it difficult, at least for me, to lie to myself. I don't know about you guys, about being able to like self-delude, but I try to be radically honest with myself about certain things. Like, I probably could put in more work here. Like, have I really done the work to feel confident and to be able to place myself? And that's when it comes to attending things like this, reading a book, reading a talk, or going to a talk and doing different things to kind of get your feet under you, go a long way. But each of us address it in different ways. I definitely admire the people who just say, I'm just gonna do it and see what happens. And if I, at the end of the day, if I fail, I'll just get up and try something new and maybe fail again. And who knows how many times, I think the people who try and fail most often are among the most admirable out there. All right. So taking this a little personal approach in here, dare in my own life. First, of course, I think all of us probably remember the first encounter with dare. Actually, I was fascinated by this. I had forgotten the acronym, Drug Abuse Resistance Education. I don't know how many of you, I think probably a few of you, based on the look here, probably had that same course back in school. There's a varying degrees of effectiveness, I think, for all of us, but an admirable effort. But in reality, so 3 sort of different dares from different parts of my life. When I was young, or 22, 23, I went to my first music festival in 2008. I went to Coachella alone after the people I was going to go with kind of dropped out towards the last minute. And I was dead set on going, but I was a huge nerd, super introverted, super shy, and going to this huge music festival and camping for 3 days with a whole bunch of strangers, literally, it terrified me, but I sucked it up and I ended up going. It ended up being an instantly transformational experience. I literally came back a different person because I went and did that. And I would say within about 15 minutes of setting up my tent, I had met 3 or 4 people and just kind of got co-opted into a little group there almost instantly. And every fear I had going into it was totally overblown. And I took that away. And not only did it help me with just my personal independence and confidence of, doing something that scared me and having it go so well, but just that the fear, if we were to measure it versus the actual risk you're taking, I think it's very disproportional. The amount of fear you have about a thing isn't really proportional to the actual risk if you were to size it up. So that was one from my earlier life. And then one day, several years ago, probably going on 5 now, I don't know if any of you ever heard of bullet journaling. So I had watched a TED Talk about bullet journaling for someone who was talking about ADHD. I should have looked up the name and have it here, but I was inspired. I went on Amazon, bought a journal, and I'm like, I'm going to give this a shot for organizational purposes. Really just as a planner and to take notes. And so I told myself I'm going to give it a couple weeks, see if it sticks, and it definitely stuck. So I had no idea that trying this would turn into anything. But I just told myself that I would check in at the beginning of the day for 5 or 10 minutes and give it a go. And doing that started to, it quickly morphed into a passion for writing. And self-reflection and personal therapy, whatever you want to call it. I would just start writing a couple of sentences and the floodgates would just open and I would just start writing. And so I have these little, journal books that I still write in. And now I started in one of these and probably 5 years ago. And I have 40 or 50 of these now. That's several dozen, full, back to back. I look at it every day. It's sort of like the glue of my life. I use it as a planner, take notes in it, kind of all things. But most importantly, the reflection and the actual writing. So one thing that I should dare to do after this talk is to actually publish one of these. So I probably have 40 or 50 full long written blog posts that I've written to myself but never shared with anybody. So daring to share is not part of the talk here, but I think it is an important aspect and something that I should take my own advice here probably start writing publicly instead of privately. And then converting from design to development, we talked about that imposter syndrome. In 2015, I was turning 30, and I was kind of doing some soul searching about my life. And I looked at what I was doing with my development company, and I was solving objective questions with objective answers. There's definitely creativity involved for sure. I wouldn't deny that for a moment, but as we were doing that, we had a chance to do some website designs. As we were doing some coding, we had some of that UI UX stuff we would do. We were primarily in the code layer, but occasionally we would have our designer like design a logo or something like that. And one day we actually designed a logo for someone for free that just ran a local organization here in downtown Phoenix. It's just a friend of mine, and we were like, hey, we're happy to kind of crank something out for you. So we designed her a logo, and she ended up loving it. She came back a few weeks later into our office, and she had blown up this logo we made for her and framed it and signed it. And she's like, I'm gonna give one of these to you. And I want to let you know, she's telling me this. I want to let you know that what you guys designed for me, I put above my desk, and every day before I start working, I look at it and it just brings me so much like joy and energy, and it inspires me to like work every day. It's like, I never would have thought that what you guys designed would, end up being so meaningful to me, but it is. And I thought I would share that with you. And literally at that moment, I really acknowledge and internalize the work I was doing with development contrasted versus the work that I might be able to do in the creative space, the design space. Nobody in all of my development time had ever said anything like that, let alone a thank you or whatnot. But to say that they had been truly moved and that, they have it impacted their life in a positive way. So right there, pretty much on the spot, subconsciously, I started to, kind of embrace and say, you know what, I look at development as objective answers to objective questions. And I look at design as subjective answers to subjective questions. It's actually way more difficult. 10 people can look at a piece of art or a piece of creative work and give it 10 different scores, and they're all right. Whereas in development, it's kind of the opposite. Now, while that is attractive to some for many different reasons, I like the challenge of in the intangible nature of a lot of design and creative work. So that was, and since then I've converted over now our agency. So I went from a software development firm to more of an agency set up where we do branding, and storytelling narratives for most of our clients, brand identity, brand development, and then website design and all that sort of stuff. And I pretty much don't do any coding every day. I still kind of flex those muscles here and there. It's a part of my life and a part of my first identity for sure. But at the end of the day, my passion now is in everything creativity and design wise. So I'm gonna check the chat real quick here. I saw some people jumping in there. Fear is skydiving. Actually, you know what? We're gonna touch on this. Go ahead. I'll wait. I'll wait till I have a quote about that later, so I'm gonna come back to that. Laura Lee mentioned bullet journaling. Anyone else do that? I love people watching making the creative spread. So it's funny. I have never doodled in my journal once. So some people are like the doodlers with all the various markers. For me, it's like my personal therapist, my personal planner. I love going back on and looking on my planning days when I'll have like a task, and I have the old tricolor pen, my favorite thing. This is like, I love this thing. You do everything in black, and then I go back to like a meeting. I'll have a note about a meeting I'm supposed to do, and I love to go back a few days later and actually in blue, I'll write a reflection about that meeting as a kind of something sets, and I can kind of go in and have like little personal reflections and time to go back and use the journal, the bullet journal, dots for events as prompts to sort of, allow myself to reflect and process and internalize, what might happen. Like, actually, like that meeting didn't really go very well. I wasn't really confident. It's amazing what you think about something a few days removed from it, when you actually come back and put some time and space from it and allow yourself, I think, to be more honest with it. So anyways, thank you for those. So some famous takes on dare. I'm gonna start with a super obvious one I'm sure some of you thought about already. Ms. Brene Brown from Daring Greatly fame. Daring greatly and being brave and afraid every minute of the day. Oh, geez, see, there it is. Daring greatly is being brave and afraid every minute of the day at the exact same time. So I thought this actually perfectly captured the essence of what it means to dare, right? It's this internal struggle between courage and fear, and you kind of live in a perpetual state of a healthy fear and using that and channeling that motivation. So and in her book on Daring Greatly, mainly on vulnerability, probably one of the most important works in the last 10 years, super popular. Love her talks. If you guys aren't familiar with her, definitely recommend looking up her books. It's a great read. Next, and I think Brene Brown might have seen this quote as inspiration. Only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly. And I think Kennedy deserves some credit here in putting his money where his mouth is, so to speak, by pushing the country into the space race. So he really was an inspirational figure in the early 60s there, put a man on the moon. And and I'm guessing Brene Brown also kind of used this as a cue as well. Moving on. Walt Disney: first think, second believe, third dream, and finally dare. So I love this one. Walt Disney is probably one of the most quotable people out there, as I was looking up quotes to kind of include in here. But I think here, daring to actually dream, that you can have a big impact, is really important, and I think poignant. And I love this one. It's very, very simple. But dare to take the risk and to face up to the fear. It requires action. You can't just keep it in your head. So on leadership, I thought it'd be healthy to include one here. The daring leader helps people see a future state greater than their own imagination and worthy of pursuit. Cheryl, I'm not even going to try. Batchelor, from her book Dare to Serve: How to Drive Superior Results by Serving Others. A great read if you haven't read it. So for this one, as visionaries, as leaders of your own company, I have that responsibility with my own agency, and I struggle with that from time to time. I feel like I have a vision, but it requires healthy execution behind it as well. Anyway, moving on. So kind of touched on this. Eleanor Roosevelt, also highly quotable, I found. Do one thing every day that scares you. So I think we kind of touched on this in a breakout room. There's a little bit of a topic there. I embrace this, especially recently coming out of the pandemic. And say the last several months here, we've been stuck in lockdown, whatnot, as things started to open back up. I don't know about you guys, I found myself in a little bit of a rut of sorts. I had tried some new creative projects, tried to use the time the circumstances as best as I could to make lemonades out of the lemons that life dealt us, and to kind of do different things to shake myself out of what turned into be the new normal of pandemic lockdown. And so doing everything is scary. I actually made a list, in the journal. I just crank one out. And the first thing I did was jump out of a plane, which someone else mentioned in there. I thought that was really, really easy one to do. And it was. We just drove down to Tucson. If you guys haven't, halfway down to Tucson, there's a little airfield down there. It takes a few hours. I highly recommend it. Ended up loving it. As soon as you land on the ground, they give you like hey, if you want to do another one right now and go up and do a second one, they'll do it for like half off, and they'll just take you right up again. I definitely took them up on that. I definitely was nervous on the plane ride up, but you literally sit down there as you're doing the training and see hundreds of people land safely, and you just realize, it's going to be a great experience, and embraced it. And then doing different things, give you this talk kind of qualifies here as well. Something that scares me, and I have a list here of some big and some small. That not every day is probably a big ask, but do things often that scare you. So a big thing I'm going to be doing in next year is doing a fundraising challenge for the Lymphoma and Leukemia Foundation here in Phoenix. It's like a 10-week fundraising competition, which is like actually going out and making an ask and doing that, which is not something I'm typically very comfortable with. I don't like asking people to do various things. So and so that one actually scares me huge. Just like there's this big event at the end of it, and I'm going to be asking all sorts of people and kind of going out there, never done something like that, and kind of making putting myself out there in that way. So that's one I have planned. That's not till March though, so we have a ways away from that. But and then another thing I used to do is travel alone. So I went from the Coachella thing, kind of was terrified traveling alone, going anywhere. Now I actually, it doesn't scare me at all. I totally embrace it and love it. And I encourage it. If you guys don't get a lot of alone time, I'm a big believer in, moments of solitude and what can come from, time with yourself, especially if you have family or a significant other living with you or something like that, and you don't have a lot of time to, going on a hike alone, like, go do Camelback or Payastoa, or do a hike, alone one day, just sit down and by a creek or something for 20-30 minutes in a semi-meditative state, and to be more comfortable being by yourself and being alone. You're in this age of social media, I think we kind of created a dynamic where that's not something that people are very comfortable with, and people might be scared of just doing something alone. Like I know people who won't go see a movie alone, or go to dinner alone, or something like that, for various reasons, and I think that's really sad, to be quite honest. Moving on, I love this one. A person who dares to waste 1 hour of time has not discovered the value of life. I think that pairs well with the dare do one thing every day that scares you, sort of to embrace the time we have here, the limited amount of time we do have here in our lives, and to sort of not waste any hour of it. So kind of a contrary take on dare here. And then this topic goes back really far. So I found a quote from Homer from way back in the day. What he greatly thought, he nobly dared. So this idea of daring greatly and daring in general is from antiquity, and still as present today, I think, as it ever was. And then lastly, William Danforth, I dare you while while there's still time to have a magnificent obsession. To me, this is to find and follow your passion and to pursue, what fills your cup, what fills your heart. William Danforth actually wrote a book called I Dare You, which I had read. I had on my bookshelf here. So when this topic came up, I actually Daring Greatly in this I Dare You book came up right away. The book, I don't know if I would recommend it. It's definitely a good read, although it's dated in that it is basically written only to dudes. It's basically all about guys. It's like a kind of like a Jordan Peterson sort of take. It's like about guys like sit up straight, have good posture. Speaks mainly only to men. But when it was written, I guess back in the day, you could give him some grace for that. He wasn't the only one. For later, if any of you guys have any of your favorite dare quotes, I'm sure they're out there. I'd love to hear that in the Q&A section. See what inspires you as well. All right, so to close this out here, I took a little bit of a dare myself to kind of look at the word dare in a unique way, and I thought I wanted to share this with you. So first, I'm going to go back to fear. So I'm a fan of Anne Lamott, who is a writer and wrote a book about helping people write, actually. And I caught her on a podcast where she got to talking about fear, and she used this acronym: fear expressed allows relief. And at the moment, right time, right place, that message really resonated with me. At the time, again, that imposter syndrome, what's great about these sort of things is when you just start talking to people about it, it does most of the work of actually helping someone overcome it. And so that the acronym approach is, I love my language and my words. So I thought I'd take a shot at looking at the word dare in a similar way. So, exciting. I did not. So daunting, audacious, risky, and exciting. So to face a fear, right? It's daunting, audacious, risky, and exciting. Dreams always require effort. So kind of talk about the aspect. I forget who. I think was it Thoreau or something, building castles in the sky sort of thing. But if you don't take the actions to build the foundations underneath them, they just stay as dreams. And I think this one, I like this one probably the best. Dreams always require effort. You have to actually pursue them. You have to take action. So this one basically on fear: doubt amplifies resistant energy. So if you have fear and you're kind of doubting yourself, don't let fear get the best of you. And the more you kind of stew on it, I think the bigger it becomes, the bigger of a roadblock it can potentially become, where action in the face of fear helps you alleviate it much more. Similarly, in the face of fear, delve, accept, rise, and embrace. And then, I guess creatively speaking, you can say dazzle, amaze, radiate, and enthuse. I had a lot of fun putting these together. Have came up with quite a bit. Couple more. Don't avoid risky endeavors. And then lastly, this is kind of a yin and yang sort of one. So directing activities reduces effort, sort of in the, planning helps kind of be in the, but decisive action rewards effort. So you can't just plan. That's sort of like leaving a dream, putting the work in to achieve it. Decisive action rewards effort. So that the planning helps, but action is favorable. So wrapping up here. So just a few, that book was called I Dare You by William Danforth. So kind of to close out the talk here, I dare you all to be different, to dream, and to begin, to take the action and take a step to actually address a fear, to take a dare, and pursue your dreams. And the greatest journeys all start with just one step, and the first step is the most important one. So that is all I have. Thank you so much.